This video is inspired by TierZoo.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
The Arctic server is known for being one of the hardest to survive. Because of its passive status effects, you'll receive constant damage ticks unless you have the right equipment. So in order to survive and let alone thrive in the Arctic, a special kind of player with a special kind of build is required. Some players spec into thick fur or down feathers to be able to tank the debuffs of the cold, but some others have decided to go down a much different route, maxing out their fat tree line and leveling it up to blubber, providing them extreme insulation from the cold. But one build in particular has tapped into this more effectively than any other, combined with great stats and a few special adaptations to make it one of the most powerful builds in the Arctic. This build is the Walrus. Drawing us to the question, are Walrus overpowered? To understand their unique playstyle, we must first understand where the Walrus player base comes from. Well, they are members of the Pinniped Guild, which also comprises the Seal and Sea Lion player bases. The Pinniped are also part of a larger faction of Caniformia, whose high-level players split up years ago to adapt to the changing meta, creating builds as widespread and diverse as wolves, bears, skunks, and many others respectively. But what makes the Pinnipeds so special? All of them have decided to spend their evolution points on adding semi-aquatic traits to their kit. Some of the traits they spec'd into include changing their paws to flippers. While being a huge sacrifice in terms of damage, it gave an enormous and much needed buff to their mobility in the water. Another one was leveling up their diving abilities. They did this by reinforcing their lungs and trachea with extra cartilage and muscle to ensure their respiratory system doesn't get damaged by the pressures of diving deep under the water. And lastly, putting some skill points into unlocking the immunity to debuffs like oxygen toxicity and decompression sickness, making them excellent swimmers, well adapted to surviving in the ocean servers. So with these changes, while many others like the Polarbear and Wolfmanes are struggling to find food in the cold and dark winter months of the Arctic, the Pinnipeds have the ability to unlock valuable loot that's unattainable by builds that are stuck on land. Adding to this, while yes, they focused a lot of their evolution points on aquatic adaptations, unlike the Whalemanes, the Pinnipeds still decided to maintain some of their land capabilities, giving them the option to switch between aquatic and terrestrial servers quickly without penalty, and giving them a way to escape from many of the high-tier griefers they might encounter on land or in water. Now the three most popular Arctic Pinniped builds are the Ring Seal, Bearded Seal, and of course the Walrus. But the former two have many bad matchups on land and in the ocean, basically relying on being able to escape and hide from predators to survive. And if they fail the skill check, it usually leads to an immediate game over from the high tier predator builds. The Walrus, on the other hand, has spec'd into some unusual traits that not only allows it to tank these game-ending hits, but also allows them to be the premier Pinniped build in the Arctic server. So what are these traits so you can incorporate them into your own build? For one, as we talked about before, their thick blubber gives them excellent cold resistance, but it also serves another purpose, giving them one of the best defenses in the game. These guys are massive and basically made themselves so fat that they're dangerous to even be next to, as they can weigh up to 2 tons. Combined with this, their skin can grow to be up to 1.5 inches thick, and their blubber up to 6 inches, rendering them basically impervious to most damage. Being so strong, in fact, that not even the canines of the largest terrestrial predator build currently in the game, the Polarbear, can penetrate them. Their only real bad matchup is the Orca, which really doesn't matter that much because firstly, Orcas have the second best build in the game, and secondly, Walrus can escape onto land, where the Orca doesn't really stand much of a chance. But their large size and defensive traits take a lot of XP to sustain. So the Walrus Guild has taken some specific actions in order to sustain their large sizes. For one, they've leveled up their whiskers, serving as a crucial sensory adaptation. These enhance a player's perception of their environment and allow for heightened spatial awareness and detection of nearby entities. While primarily observed in felide or mustelid builds, whiskers offer a distinct advantage in low-light conditions, which is extremely important for the walrus, who find their main source of nourishment on the seafloor. These tactile sensors significantly boost their chances of finding good loot drops. And the loot drops that the walrus is constantly trying to go after are clams and mussels. In response, the two communities have recently signed a petition claiming this adaptation is busted, but for now the devs don't really seem to be inclined to patch it. So the walrus has decided to carry on, using their whiskers to comb the sea floor until they feel their prey, which seems like it wouldn't be that effective, but let me tell you, it is. And it's so effective to the point where walrus can eat up to 3,000 to 6,000 clams in a single feeding session, fueling their large sizes and always giving them easy loot to farm. But wait a minute, how do walrus eat so many clams if they've basically spent all of their evolution points on maxing out their hardness tree line? Did the walrus develop extremely strong jaws to crack open the clams? Nope. The real answer is a lot more terrifying. The walrus has decided to spec into a rare ability called suction feeding, and employ this feeding technique to extract and consume their prey. So what they do is, after locating a clam or mussel with their whiskers, the walrus positions its mouth over the target area and puts its lips against the ground, creating a seal, no pun intended. So now that they've isolated the specific spot where the prey is buried, the walrus will now use its tongue to create a vacuum by retracting it rapidly. This vacuum effectively draws in water, sediment, and the targeted prey into the walrus's mouth. So basically, they create a vacuum in their mouth to rip the meat right out of the clams. Thank God they can't use that on other players. Right? Okay, so apparently the research team is telling me they can. Some walrus have been known to eat other seals, like the ring seal, where they literally suck chunks of meat right off of the seal. That's not a fun way to go out. So a little piece of advice for you ring seal mains out there, don't get caught by a walrus. Now besides defense, unlike most other Pinniped builds, the walrus has invested into a very powerful attack move. This is by using their 2 tusks, which are just leveled up teeth, and at max level can reach up to 3 feet long. It can be used to stab anything that the walrus deems as a worthy threat, and this makes facing a high level walrus nearly impossible for most predators. Even polar bear players would only pick fights with a walrus if they literally had no other option, and when they do it, it usually doesn't end well for them. Of course, while they use these tusks to stab any griefers they might face, they can also use them against each other, when competing for spawn partners. Nevertheless, they also come with a mobility perk, allowing them to climb up icy sheets. So while most walruses are off limits to land carnivores, basically being unkillable piles of meat with 2 swords on their face, the walrus does have some downsides that can make them vulnerable to predation during their playthrough. These vulnerable points come mostly when a walrus is at a really low level, because they're pretty weak, not really being able to rely on their size, weight, or tusks to protect them. Instead, they rely on the protection of their mothers as well as gathering in herds. These herds can comprise anywhere from a few dozen to over a few thousand walrus strong, forming an impenetrable wall of blubber which is basically impossible to break into, keeping the low-level calves safe. But while largely successful, there are some drawbacks of their herd formation. For one, polar bears can exploit the walrus's fear of them, so when they're all panicking trying to escape into the ocean, sometimes the smaller walrus can be crushed in a stampede, giving the bear free loot drops. Or on other occasions, in the confusion, the calves could be separated from their mother and left out in the open, giving the polar bear a chance to swipe in and get their prize. And lastly, on certain maps with cliffy environments, the walrus can get confused, basically making an XP farm for whatever carnivores stumble on the loot, where one after another, the walrus will just go jumping off the cliffs to their deaths. In total, max level walrus are basically unkillable, and are well sustained by abundant food sources on the seafloor. Their only weak point, which is similar to almost every other build in the game, is their recently spawned in calves. All these factors come together to make the walrus not only an S tier Arctic build, but also an overpowered one. For all you guys out there looking for a nice Arctic build to play that isn't too stressful, the walrus is a perfect choice for you. Do you guys think the walrus is overpowered? And do you like this video? I know it's in the style of TierZoo, so full credit to him, but he takes a while to release his videos and I just needed something to hold me over in the meantime. So thanks for watching everyone, and let me know if you think I should do another video like this. And what topic do you think it should be about? Thank you guys for watching once again, and Jehona out.